Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us in this exciting webinar on this beautiful Friday afternoon. My name is Bob Tremblay. I'm the Superintendent of Schools in Framingham, and it's really a pleasure to have you here with us today. So I have a few guests with me that are joining to have a conversation about the Knobscott, historic Knobscott Chapel move, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I know we have some students and some families and some guests who are joining us today, and so glad you can be here. Let me quickly introduce our guests today. We have PJ Feynman, who's our STEAM coach in Framingham. So STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And so PJ helps us to support students and staff around this topic. We have Rick McKenna, who's with us. If you don't see him playing the piano in his virtual cocktail hours he's been doing for us in quarantine, he's been pretty awesome at that. Rick's become a friend over these last months as we've worked on this project together. So Rick's a longtime Framingham resident with an extensive experience in construction. He's actually the owner of Symphony Builders, which is symbolic, I think, of his musicianship. But he's which is a firm. But Rick is he currently serves in Framingham on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and he's also an advocate for the preservation of historic property. And I'll be coming back to Rick in a moment to talk a little bit about some of the history around this chapel move and what made it significant. We don't have with us Stan Wilds, who's going to join us today, but he's probably on another project. Stan Wilds is the owner of Stan's Granite State Building Movers, LLC. So this is the company that you'll see featured later in our video reveal. And Stan, of course, was the lead guy on the project, and multiple generations of his family were involved in this move. Which is pretty great. So sorry that Stan can't be here, but I'm sure we'll share this video with him, and I'm sure that he'll love to see this being captured. Also, fortunate to have Madeline Tremblay. Madeline she's it's not coincidental. She's my daughter, but Madeline is an aspiring video production engineer, director, producer, movie, whatever's her future will go, and this is a chance for her to capture this footage in a remarkable number of ways. She partnered with Access Framingham with the video component of this, and so she and Frank Morello, who's credited later in our presentation, but Maddie and Frank both worked collaboratively on this, getting some photographs, some video footage. Both Maddie's portion of this was the drone photography, as you'll see in the video, and as well as some time lapse and some nice close-up films that Frank did. Who's a production engineer at their local cable television station in Framingham. So just a great community collaboration overall, and glad to have everybody here. So to give some context for what we're doing today, months ago, maybe longer, we had this idea about wouldn't it be great to get our students to bear witness to this really exciting historic event. And so you have a chapel, and I won't steal all of Rick's thunder on this move, but you have a chapel that's going to be sort of moved out of the way and preserving the history of the community. And so we'll talk about how that happened, and we'll talk about with PJ about when we get students to think about if they had to move a building, how would they do it? And then we'll see how it actually was done. And so getting to this point, what the idea was, we were going to originally have, this is pre-COVID, we were going to have the students from Hemenway Elementary School walk down the street. We had everything all planned out. We were going to have an area sectioned off for our students to watch the big move happen. And because of the size of the city and the cost of transportation, it was really going to be a featured production of just the Hemenway students, Hemenway grade 3 in particular, because in third grade in our city is when students study the history of Framingham. And so this was really going to be fairly exclusive to Hemenway at the time, just by proximity, being down the road on Edgell. It turned out, you try to find the silver lining in things, and it turned out that with COVID-19, this became an opportunity, actually, to not only capture this for all time, the historic move, but also share this broadly with every third grader in Framingham to have a bird's eye view of what actually happened. And so from out of crisis comes tremendous opportunity. And that's the way we looked at this, and I hope you look at it the same way. So that's sort of the idea of how this was born, saying how can we get students to bear witness to something that's historic? Because they'll forever remember that day when I was in third grade and I watched the chapel being moved. And it may not seem so significant right now, for some, maybe more than others, But when you're older and you reminisce as you drive by, it's significant. This doesn't happen every day. And so what a great opportunity for us to be part of that. Then I had a chance to talk with Rick, and Rick got involved in the project, and I'm going to turn it to him now to share a bit about his involvement in this work, and why he's so excited about this, and how he got the rest of us kind of looped into this, and has been a real tireless advocate for being, and he's been on site literally every minute. This thing has been moving from point A to point B, with point A 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 along the way. So Rick, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for being part of our community. It's been great to get to know you, to become a friend of yours in our time together. And tell us a little bit about your involvement in this work, why it matters to you, and why it should matter to the rest of us.
Okay, well, thanks much, Bob, and hello, everybody. Just quickly, as far as schools, I was a student at Hemenway School, at Walsh Middle School. Back then it was called Junior High School, and then Framingham North High School, and that was called North because there was a North and South, and then went off to business school at Northeastern. So as far as the chapel goes, I got into building, and my passion is for historic buildings. So I've done a lot of work on buildings that were from the 1600s, 1700s, and 1800s. Of course, I do modern work, but I really love the old buildings. There's so much history, and as they say, if the walls could talk, you can imagine what was going on there 100 years ago. Just looking at a pew in the chapel, who was sitting there, who could have been sitting there, what have you. There's so many hidden stories back there. It's always been fascinating to me. A little history on the chapel and what happened with it was, let's go back to the beginning. Back in 1880, the chapel, it was the North Framingham Protestant Union Chapel Association. That was formed, this section of Framingham and Knobscot was called North Framingham at the time. Prior to the 1880s, for a time it was called New Boston. And a lot of people do not know that Knobscot was originally New Boston. So Edgar Hemenway, and I'm sure you could figure out that he has something to do with Hemenway School. He lived in a building across from Hemenway, which is the space that the McAuliffe Library now sits upon. The white building that was there was his house, and he owned property from the railroad tracks to his side all the way up to Water Street and Edgell. And he was a part of the Union Chapel Association. And what he did, they wanted to build a chapel. So he was in the association, and he sold almost about a quarter acre up at the corner to his own association for $1. Quite a good deal. And then they built the chapel. And the directors of the association, I want to throw a few names out there, and you can probably figure out why I'm giving you the names. Directors were William Hamilton, Gilbert Child, Childs, Angus Potter, Pottr, William Abbott, and the treasurer was another Hemenway, Elbert Hemingway. And the Hemenways were very well known in Framingham. There weren't too many families, but a lot of the families that were there at the time, you'll see streets named after them all over the place. So that was $1. Now, about 15 years ago, there was a group that was renting the chapel. And it was a religious group. I can't recall the name right now, but they were not paying their water bill. And they thought that the owner of the building was paying the water bill. The owner of the building thought that the congregation was paying for the water bill. And all of a sudden, they assumed $16,000, which they didn't have, nobody had to do. So they just said, take it, it's yours. And the town at the time, Framingham, took it by tax title. And that's when they had the opportunity to do something with it. And since 2012, there were, I believe, 5 RFPs, which is request for proposals, for somebody to do something with the chapel. The developer who owns the whole area, Andy Rose, and myself were the 2 people that were interested in the chapel. I was going to put a restaurant in there, And it was Tippling Rock Trading Post, which is going to be historical 1880s Framingham. Unfortunately, I did not win the bid, and Mr. Rose won the bid. And the chapel was to be moved and saved, and that's the most important thing for me, that it is not demolished. A lot of people don't see the beauty and the history in old buildings, like I never did when I was growing up going to school, but as I got older, the appreciation really stemmed out. So what Mr. Rose has planned to do in the redevelopment of Knobscott is to put a gigantic CVS at the corner. And if you've noticed, a lot of things have been demolished. Then there will be an apartment complex also. So he had to move the chapel somewhere, and he moved it over next to Gianni's as the plan. And then he owns the chapel, and he's looking to have some type of somewhat upscale restaurant eating establishment in there. After COVID, I don't know if the plans will change, but that's where it lives right now, and that's what should be happening with it. He got in touch with Stan at Granite State Movers, and worked with Stan on moving it over to the new location. And I asked if I could get in to bring this group along so it could be documented and used for educational purposes. And he agreed. He's been great. And we've had a blast working over there and following the progress of it. So that's my involvement, and that's why I'm here. And later on, if anybody has any questions about the chapel and its history, I'm hoping I can help you out there. Back to you, Bob.
Rick, thanks so much. And I'm glad you mentioned that about if anyone has any questions, because this is we're broadcasting here, of course, on Facebook and on YouTube, and so you have an opportunity. While we don't have everybody on screen engaging in a big kind of Zoom class experience, we do have an opportunity for people who are watching to raise questions, whether they're curriculum related questions or questions about any aspect of this project. Feel free to put them put them out to us. We'll make sure we get it on my feed here, and then I can direct the questions to the best people to answer those. And Rick, you got us our very first hard hats. You got us backstage passes, if you will, to get onto the site. We had these great lanyards with the historic picture. And we'll see that later on too of the chapel back in its heyday, with people outside and socializing back when you could do that without having to be 6 feet apart with a face covering. But you can see this wonderful reminiscence of history. And so I want to thank you for being a partner on this project and for helping to vision that. And then from here, we were able to say, well, everything's a teachable moment in life. Every single thing's a teachable moment. And something like this has real potential to be even more deep knowledge. And here we are, everyone's teaching and learning from home, whether we like it or not. But how can we make this exciting? Because we can't have the students there firsthand to see it, but we do have a solution to that. But how can we replicate this? How is there a way where our students could have some opportunity to say, wow, how did you do that? How would you take, and I don't even know how many tons, that would be one of the questions I would have if Stan were on the call. How many tons is this building? And how do you move something so big? You can't just, get a bunch of guys and pick it up and move it over. And so we enlisted the support of PJ Feynman, our STEAM coach in the district. And PJ, I'm going to turn it to you to tell us a little bit about what does a STEAM coach do? What do you do in sort of your day-to-day work? And how did you use this sort of concept around the mechanical advantage challenge that you've been doing throughout this, time in remote weekly instruction during this remote time of teaching and learning, and how you took this project to be a challenge for our students, and then maybe lead us into how our students responded to the challenge to see if they had to move this building or a structure, how would you accomplish that? So there's all kinds of ways that integrate these kinds of concepts of structural engineering and physics and math and science. And tell us a little bit about that work and why it excites you and how you applied it to this project.
Okay, that's a lot. So I'll start with thanking you, Dr. Tremblay, for asking me to be part of this project. It's been really, really fun. I really enjoyed it. As a K-12 STEAM coach in Framingham, I have a few different things that I do. S is for science, T is for technology, E is for engineering, A is for art, M is for math. And the idea behind that title, where all of those letters are capitalized, is that even though we go to science class and then we go to math class and then we go to art class and they seem like they're separate, all of these things are connected and combined. And everything is so exciting when we learn about how they work together. And so that's the idea behind me being a STEAM coach, is to see all of the connections between the different subjects, and then to support staff members, to support our administration, to support our teachers, in bringing these concepts together and just having really fun and engaging lessons for students. So then I also work directly with students, and I also write curriculum. So there's a lot of different pieces of my work. And for me, this is like my dream job. I'm double licensed in math and science. And it's hard to pick like what you love the most. And this way I don't have to pick ever. So it's great. We started this series of STEAM challenges when we went to remote learning. And so I wanted to give the kids every week a chance to do a hands-on project, to spend some time doing something that, you know, sometimes we don't have time to do in school. So you were talking about silver linings, Dr. Tremblay. And I thought, what a great way to have the kids just be able to spend as much time as they want to trying to build things, and not say, oh, our time is up, it's time to go to lunch or whatever. If you want to spend all day taping cardboard and whatever, you can do that. So that was the spirit with which we started the STEAM at Home website, to give out a weekly STEAM challenge. And I don't know if we're able to click on that link and show the website or not, but that's okay, cool. Just to show you how it's set up. So this is the homepage of the website. And what I do every week is I list this week's challenge at the top. So there is the Mechanical Advantage Challenge. That's a challenge for this week. And then if you scroll down, you'll see every week's challenge in reverse chronological order and some of the results. And there are links there if you want to see full results to go to the results page. I'm going to be leaving this up all summer. So if any students missed any of the challenges or you want to do them now, they're still live and you can do them, and I'll be really happy to see your work. So this is how we've issued the challenges. And then I just let teachers know and principals know, and they put them on their calendars or newsletters. And then kids started doing it. And I just kept my fingers crossed that somebody would send me some work. And they did. And it's just been a really fun and joyful experience. We're trying to think about how to keep it going once we're back to a more traditional school framework.
Excellent.
So,
tell us a little bit about how you got to the, was it, you gave the challenge out to, oh, there's the picture of the chapel back in the day of people hanging outside. And so tell us what you did from here. So knowing that what you do each week, and how did you pitch this project? So our goal all of the time is to teach the kids the engineering design process. So we want them to, succeed in the challenge, but more importantly, we want them to learn, how do engineers do something? If you want to solve a problem, how do you do that? And then we have a content issue. So for the Mechanical Advantage Challenge, my content goal was to have the kids learn about simple machines and how we do work with these simple machines that we couldn't do with our hands. We couldn't lift a building. We're not strong enough as humans to lift a building. But if we have a lever, we can use mechanical advantage and we can lift a building. And if we have a wheel, we can roll that building. So how do we use these simple machines, and how do they give us advantage in engineering? So that was the content. Then we want the kids to learn perseverance. Like, if it doesn't work the first time, what do you do? What's your next step? And so in this challenge, it took months to move that chapel. And so I tried to build in a perseverance piece into the challenge as well. And that came in the testing phase, where when they had to move their building, they had to put on the top these little cups that had
goldfish or pom-poms. You'll see that the kids are really creative using the materials that they have around the house. I tried to put out challenges that were accessible to any child, but especially during this time of COVID, you can't assume that people have certain things sitting around the house. So one of the challenges was to figure out how are you going to do this challenge with the materials that you have, even if it's not exactly what I described. And then we asked them to communicate. How did you do your, what is the story of your build? What happened? And so here's the challenge as it was on the page we saw it a moment ago, to use to move a house 2 feet using only simple machines. And this is a picture so that they could get an idea of what I meant by moving a house. So we wanted it to be like enough directions the kids would know how to start, but not so many directions that we stifled their creativity and told them step by step how to do it. So as long as you had some sort of house, something that would indicate if it was breaking, for my description was the cups with something in it. And if the cups spilled while you were moving it, that meant your building broke. And then the constraint to use the simple machines. And then, it was like, go time. And then we wait and see what happens.
That's fantastic.
So,
I was thinking about this. Just to interrupt you, just for a minute of reflection there.
Of course.
I was thinking about that the whole time when we see this chapel being moved. If somebody here spills the goldfish, you pick them up. If somebody spills the chapel, that's a whole different level of cleanup. And so this is the real life here. So I love the concept. And of course, it would seem to me that if you're looking at a box of pasta, you could just pick it up and move it, right? So you had some requirements in here where you couldn't use these, as I recall it.
Yeah, you were not allowed to touch the box. That's correct. That's correct. So we see the kids used incredible creativity to get around those constraints and to stick with all the criteria that they had to for the challenge. And so I'd like to bring you to the work now and show you, because this has been, for me, one of the things that has brought me the most joy during this remote learning period is seeing the kids' responses and seeing their work and enthusiasm. I'm sure I speak for all of our staff and administrators that just time after time, seeing the creativity of our kids and how they rose to this occasion has been really heartening. So here's our first video.
Test 4, take 4.
So you'll see her start places. They had to move it 2 feet. So if you noticed, she has tape there indicating the start and the stop line. So if you could go to the next slide, please. This is the story, the communication piece. I always ask them to tell me the story of how they did the challenge. So if you noticed at the beginning when she said take 4, so it meant that was the 4th time, right? And so that's where the perseverance piece came in. So if you read her story, and she says, first I made a lot of designs that failed. Second, I watched a YouTube video on someone moving their shed. Third, I got an idea and used a toy car that me and my dad built and made a ramp connected to my car, and then put a pulley on the building and pulled it on the car. So this was not a 5-minute thing that she did. She invested a lot of time in this, and that's one of the things that really heartens me, to see that the kids are willing to just, put it out there, give it a shot, give it another shot, give it another shot, give it another shot. It's very encouraging. Okay, next one. Okay, here's another approach to this challenge.
We'll have to make sure that Stan sees this. He might have some future employees for Granite State building movers.
Some of them came very close to how they actually moved the building. We can see here his patience and how careful he's being.
And this is how the Romans moved a lot of the stone to build the pyramids. Same process.
So these pencils are actually modified wheels, just in case you're asking where are the simple machines.
Nicely done.
I'm sure, like, right after it got cut off, he looked at the camera and had this huge smile on his face, so we can all imagine. Okay, so he made it look so easy, right? But listen what he wrote. First, when I started, I just used the wheel and axle method. Then I got very frustrated and agitated. Yes, I felt that way. Then Dad came over and said to use the ramp method too. In the end, I succeeded. So the combination of the tools was the important thing there. And, you know, he's a third grader. So these challenges I put out, and I was really targeting them for 3rd through 5th grade. And you'll see that there's a big difference between how the 3rd graders attempt it and how the 5th graders attempt it too. So there's a lot of room in there for them to apply the things that they know and the background that they bring. Okay, next. This is a grade 5 student. Using a pulley. So there you go. Using a soda can as a pulley, and realizing that by making the motion indirect, it would be smoother, a smoother ride for the building. Okay, next one. Okay, so wait, don't play it yet. Wait. Can you stop it? Okay. So what this child is demonstrating is a problem-solving technique. So one of the things that we have put out there as a problem-solving technique for the kids is, listen, if the challenge is really hard, break it down into smaller problems. Take the big problem, break it into smaller problems, and solve the smaller problems as you go along. So this child is demonstrating a problem-solving technique of making a smaller problem. Okay. So, you know, he had to move it 2 feet, and he was like, you know what? I'm going to move that 2 miles. There you go. Very good. Mechanical advantage that a lever will give you. Also a grade 3 student.
Spoiler alert here, we did not move the chapel in this manner.
That's correct. Well, that is not historic granola, so it's okay. Okay. That's the proof of concept there. You see the cereal? So again, realizing that the indirect pull would be a smoother ride, but very clever use of an inclined plane and the wheel, the can being the wheel, to pull it down. So I just thought, you know, these kids are so creative. So here's some pictures. So this picture looks pretty simple, right? Like we just see a truck, there's a box of spaghetti there, but when you hear the story, it's a little more involved. Next slide, please. Yeah. So first, I taped the spaghetti box to 3 car Duplos and then made a ramp using a box for the object to go on and containers to hold it up. Next, I tried the ramp with a toy bus to roll down the ramp and push the spaghetti box, but the bus was too light. After, I put toys inside the ramp to see if that worked, but it still didn't work. So I made a different ramp with a piece of cardboard for that object to go on and used my table to hold it up. Then I got a big toy truck and tried that. The toy truck was heavy enough, but the ramp needed something under it so it would be sturdy enough so it didn't break when the truck went down it. So then I put a beanbag under it and saw that it worked, but the truck flipped over onto its side. Lastly, my mom held down the ramp and the toy truck made the spaghetti car go 3 feet and 3 inches across the floor. So the constraint was 2 feet. So 3 feet and 3 inches was above and beyond the design experiment. But you see the kind of things that they had, each solution led to another problem, right? And she just had to keep trying and stuck with it till she got it. And when you look at the picture, you're just like, oh, there's a truck and a box of spaghetti. But then when you hear this story, you realize that that communication piece of learning how to explain what you did is so, so important. Okay, next one. Thank you. So the next few slides are just showing us some novel materials. These are some methods that a lot of kids use, using the paper towels for the rollers underneath. Next one. And this one, again, using a string and the refrigerator, right? So looking around, what have I got? What can I use? So making that pulley out of the refrigerator handle, in this case, novel use of materials. Okay, next one. This one's similar, right? Using the hook on the back of her door to be her pulley, to try lifting it. Also, this is not what we did with the church, lifting it into the air, but it did count as 2 feet. It did count as 2 feet. So sometimes when I see the kids work and I look and I think, and then I look back at my description of what I asked them to do, I realize it's not what I expected, but they're right. I didn't say it had to be horizontal feet, right? 2 feet. I said, move it 2 feet. She moved it up 2 feet. There you go. Way to fulfill the challenge, right? Okay, next one. Okay, this again, a combination of the pulley around the fireplace and the inclined plane to pull it up onto the hearth. Next one. Okay, so this one I put in here and wanted to pause and explain that for the kids to send in the pictures and document their work is like an additional STEAM challenge. Having to explain to the kids, like, how do I take a picture with my computer? How do I save the picture on my computer? How do I upload it? All of these things were things that we had to teach them. Well, many of the kids, we had to teach them how to do that. It was an extra technology STEAM challenge in order to participate in this. And so this solution is similar to others. We see how he put the pom-poms on the top instead of Cheerios. So again, novel use of materials. But I just want to tip my hat to all of the parents and the families and the kids for really sticking it out and persevering just with the technology pieces, not only of these challenges, but of all the schoolwork that they had to do. So they really rose to that occasion as well. So congratulations to all of you kids and families for meeting that challenge. Okay, next one. This is a very close to how the building was actually moved, and just the look of focus on this child's face while working on this. I felt that was really outstanding and just wanted to show this. This is a third grader at the Brophy School. Okay, next one. So this student as well used the chalk. He's holding chalk in his hand as a wheel to move the building across the floor. And you'll see that he used different kinds of tape because he couldn't get the cups to stick with Scotch tape. So then he went and used the painter's tape and made it work that way, and then later worked up to not having the tape on it. So again, the different steps of the process. And this also, you can see his tape measure, so that he's making sure he's doing the 2 feet. using the pencils as wheels, and then pushing with a ruler to make sure he doesn't touch it with his hands, as you had said before, Dr. Tremblay, that they weren't allowed to. But again, this is something that has more of a story behind it. So next slide. So first I got a bunch of pencils and put them under the box to make it roll. The first time it fell off the end, but didn't spill the goldfish, so I added more pencils and it worked better. I tried again with a different box of books and a wheel platform I made out of Legos. It worked better and was much easier to move, but I have to make a bigger base because the wheels were too close and it tipped over. Wider wheels made it roll better. So the sort of moral of this story, next slide, please, is the most important question behind all of these STEAM challenges, which is there's always a next step. There's always another thing to try. And so the question at the end is always, what will you try next? Okay, wider wheels. Oh, I really love how some people used a pulley. I'm going to use a pulley next time. So there's always a next step. And just to sort of circle back to your first questions, that's one of the things that I love so much about being the STEAM coach. Is that there's always a next thing to try. And so next slide. So the next few slides are just showing where are the simple machines on the actual build site. I don't know if we want to show the video first, or should I do this now, or?
Well, what I would ask you, I don't know how much of the slides will reveal of the actual move. So I think it's okay to talk about that, because what I'd like to do is as our students watch, is to have them identify these simple machines in the videos. We don't call them out in the video, but they'll be very clear that from the description that you've given, from the examples that you've shown, and I think from describing quickly through these, I know just to keep an eye on the time, it's about 10 after 3, so we have to show the video still. I want to leave some time for Q&A, but if you don't mind moving fairly quickly through the various kinds of simple machines, I think that would set the nice context for the video conversation.
Okay, so you might not know when you look at a crane that a crane is a lever. That arm at the end is a lever that allows you to lift up all of that weight. And there's also a pulley in there, but mostly what you can see there is the lever. So this is a little bit hard to see. If you see right in front of the man with the yellow helmet, there's a little black thing sitting on that rod, and that is called a winch. And inside that winch, there's a pulley with a cable wrapped around it. And there's a cable leading to the chapel. And that wheel that is the pulley is going to roll around in there. And that cable is going to go around that pulley that's in there. There's also a screw there. That's okay. We can see it in the next one. Okay, so if you can do a close-up on this, that was really awesome, how you did the close-up. You can see that there's a clamp that is holding the beam to that's holding the building to the beam, and that clamp is made tight with a screw. So you could never make that pressure hard enough to actually hold that with your hand. But by twisting the screw, you can make it really hard. And there is an inclined plane you can see right under the rod, and right under those wood beams that are going back towards the rod, there's a little wedge in there. And that is actually what's keeping the building from moving forward until they're ready for it to move forward. It's holding back all of the weight of that building until they're ready. Next. So if you look at the hammer in the pocket of this construction worker, you might not realize that the back of the hammer is a wedge. So whenever you're using a hammer, you're using a simple machine. The hammer itself is a lever, and the back of it is a wedge. Okay, next one. And then here's a wheel, obviously, on the truck. The truck is going to back up with the cable on it. And I think that's the last one. Yep. That's my email address.
PJ, thanks so much for the awesome energy that you bring to this. It's clear that this is exciting work for you. You like embody the excitement of this project. And I think you gave us a nice overview of what these kinds of simple machines are. And when we watch the video reveal in a minute, we'll have a chance to really see firsthand how all that comes together in sort of a symphony with this move. I had to throw that in for you, Rick. Like a product placement plug. I want to turn it to Maddie for a minute. It's about 3:12. I want to sure leave a few minutes at the end for questions that may have come up. Maddie, this is more now for you because as PJ mentioned, that there's more than just the moving of the structure. There's the technological aspects around STEAM of actually how you capture the work that you do, whether it's you're writing about it as you saw, or you're actually documenting it with video or photographs. This is a tremendous challenge that I gave to you in this project. This is a challenge that I placed upon you. And could you tell people who are watching, because they're not going to, they're going to see the video, but as a sort of a precursor to the video, what did you have to think about going into this? How did you work with other people? Because a lot of this is around collaboration. And what kind of tools did you use in your work to get this captured for all time?
Yeah, so throughout the entire process, I was going onto the construction site not really knowing what was going to happen. So when I got there, I personally am a drone videographer, so I'm able to put my drone in the air and have my phone and basically fly around the building and get more of an aerial bird's eye view that usually we don't see unless you have like a helicopter or something like that. So I did work with Access Framingham with Frank Camarillo, and he got more close-up shots, while I was able to help with my time-lapse and my drone shots. And we were able to work with the construction workers and get more angles that usually you wouldn't really see because you couldn't go inside the fence of the construction area. So we were able to go under the building, get video there, and then close up with the truck and the pulley systems, which you will now see. And I hope that the video not only is used for educational purposes for Framingham Public Schools, but also for our community to learn about this chapel.
That's awesome. Maddie, before we show the video, Matteo, by the way, Matteo's our back-end production guy, so thanks to Matteo. You don't see him, but he's doing all the hard work. Maddie, can you just tell us, maybe just quickly before we show the video here, and let people absorb the image that's on the screen right now of the chapel back in the day. Can you tell us what was one of the more technical challenges you faced with this project coming into this? Like, flying a drone, there's all kinds of people around who are watching this. Did that make you nervous? What happens if the drone fell out of the sky? You're flying it over traffic. Was that the thing that concerned you most? Did you have any concerns, or you just didn't matter to you? You just went for it?
Yeah, so luckily I do have a good amount of experience flying around some crazy objects, and I've already had my failures in that. So, definitely takes some practice. So I think something that's always challenging for me is the power lines and just trying to get above the power lines and not crashing into them. But yeah, I didn't experience any issues with that this go around for the chapel move. But everyone at the construction site were willing to work with the video side of it and really capture the move in a way that other people can enjoy it. So.
Fantastic. And not only that, you also inspired Rick's son to be a drone videographer himself, or aspiring to do that. So it's a project inspiring you that's inspiring others. It has just this great effect. And I hope that everyone who's watching is inspired by this as well, because, to have this kind of level of an educational conversation on a Friday afternoon in what feels like the summer is really pretty exciting, at least to this guy. So, Maddie, I'm going to take it to you to introduce your video. And about how long is it? It's about a little over 4 minutes. All right. So this produced by Madeline Tremblay and with some partnership with Frank Morello, Access Framingham. Here it is. Here's the big reveal. See how you can relate to this based on your project, based on all those levers and pulleys and wheels and axles and screws, and see how it all comes together in this video.
My name is Bryce Paris. Probably working for grandfather for about 10 years. The name of the company is Stan's Granite State Building Movers. When we first get here, we have to go underneath and dig out so we can put our cribs in, which are is underneath the wood blockings, underneath the steel. So we have enough room to set our jack rams, which we are 24 inches. So we have to have enough room from the ground to the bottom of the beam there, and enough room to set the jack on. After we get everything all dug out, we roll the steel beams in. Piece of pipe that have plates welded on the side and just on bearings. So we roll those in, and after that, we jack up. Once we jack it up to the height we need, we can put our track underneath it, which is the steel. Then we put the double skates. They're Hillman double skates, I believe they're 50-ton capacity. They're nice because you can roll both ways. So obviously we're rolling this way, but we can also roll it that way. So it's nice because the track doesn't have to be dead perfect. Because if we were just rolling one direction, you'd have to have it exact, because when you roll that far, the skates would want to walk off the beams, so we'd have to jack up and move the beams. So those come in very handy, make it move nice. After you roll it out, you're just gonna leave it here for probably a couple weeks, and then we'll reset the track to go again.
That's great. Nice job, Maddie, with that. And then we have some credits here, so everyone can let that go up, so we can give credit where credit is due. That's pretty exciting to see that come together. And you know what? It turns out that if we had the original plan to have just the Hemenway students come to the corner and watch it, we never would have seen that whole project in a single day. It took multiple days, as you know, from getting this and the track reset all the way throughout. So it was actually worked out for so many reasons to have it captured in this way. So we have a little bit of time for questions. It's about 3:20 right now. And one of the questions that had come up that I believe that Rick had answered earlier was the future plans for the chapel. Now we've seen where it's sitting right next door to Johnny's. And Rick, could you maybe just tell us once again what's sort of envisioned, or what was envisioned pre-COVID for the use of the chapel?
The owner is looking to have some type of food establishment, not too large, but like some restaurant type, and probably not a chain in there. Now, with the restaurant situation post the start of COVID, it's very hard to say if he'll change the strategy on who will be in there. So it's hurry up and wait and see. So that, and if I may, Bob, you had mentioned something about the weight of the chapel. I can answer that one for you.
Oh, that's great. Because he mentioned about each of the skates, I think it being 50-ton capacity.
50.
I thought he mentioned.
Right. So if you, engineering wise, if you have 4 skates, then each of them take part of the load. So that would end up being 200 tons. Okay. Now, given that a ton is, an easy number is 2,000 pounds. With the steel that was attached to the bottom of the chapel, it was slightly under 100,000 tons that was moved. So in pounds, that would be about 200,000 pounds. And it moved like a little bit better than a Cheerios box.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks for getting that data point for us. I'm wondering if any of our students who are watching have any questions or comments, or parents or members of the community. Feel free to send a comment our way here, or question. We'd love to engage in the conversation. Well, we have everybody on our panel with us. PJ, what did you see all those levers in there that you showed us, and all those simple machines?
I did, and I think there were a few things that really stood out for me. One was, Maddie, you got such a great shot of that big wheel getting the big cable wrapping around it. So that was really amazing. And I because I had to stay behind the fence the day that I went and saw it move, I didn't even see that on site. So that was very exciting. And then the other thing that I wasn't able to see from where I was, I believe that this is what the skate is, Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but that thing that there was a close-up and it showed wheels sort of on a chain and they were rolling. So it sort of looked like a tank kind of tread thing. Is that the skate you were referring to? I didn't know that vocabulary word. So
that is part of the skate. Yeah.
Right. And so I thought that was really affirming for all of those students who used the pencils or the paper towel wheels or the chalk, and they would take the one from behind and put it back in the front. So that's pretty much dead on to what the skate is doing. It's taking a wheel and moving it forward and then sort of just moving the building along like that. So those were a couple that I hadn't seen while I was there. But I think that the other picture that was really telling for me was there was a picture where there was one of the construction workers was pulling a cable, as if he was pulling the building himself. Dr. Tremblay, you had mentioned that before.
Yeah, I think he's just kind of holding over his shoulder. He's the guy who's pulling.
It looks like he's I don't want the children to be confused. He wasn't moving the building by himself, kids. The whole point of this is that he was probably connecting that cable to that big wheel that was going to pull it, because that's how you get mechanical advantage. So those were the things that really stood out to me.
Rick, go ahead. Thanks, PJ, for that.
I just wanted to mention, and in looking at the projects that the kids did, one common theme there, which I really love being in construction, is that at first there were some failures, and the kids didn't give up, and then they went and they tried other things, which in my industry you're running into all the time. If you don't have set plans, even with set plans, sometimes they go awry, and you have to use a lot of the stuff that we were seeing here in your toolkit in your mind, so to speak. One example, that as closer to the new foundation, he had to come up with a new way to pull it. States at the beginning, his the truck. Couldn't do that because he couldn't get the truck in between the chapels. So he had a number of options, and that is when he went and got the winches that you were talking about there. And he had to come up with a way by getting some special cut metal with holes on it to clamp them down so that they could be on the track, pull, and then undo it and pull it further on the track so that they didn't have to use the truck anymore to pull it onto there. And prior to that move, phase 3, he wasn't sure what he was going to do yet. So all in the name of engineering and science, that was his best option. And he was, when it started, he said, I don't know how well this is going to work. And it worked fabulously. He said, don't tell anybody, I'm not sure. But That's
I'm not
what
sure.
this is all
I'm
about.
not sure his
I love
secret is
that.
safe anymore.
No, yeah, he didn't use the painter's tape.
Well, if he
The
ever has, if he ha- I was just going to say, if he ever has any more problems and needs some ideas, we can put it out there to the kids because they pretty much nailed it. I think by showing how that rope like pulled it along, connected to a pulley. It was really dead on.
Well, I could
We
add
had
on a historical note that too many historical buildings these days are just being demolished. And you could talk to Stan. He's been doing this for 45, 50 years, and it's almost like a dying business. There's very little need. So it would be great if kids especially could learn the significance of historical buildings so that we can try to maintain them and keep them around.
Rick, while we have just a couple more minutes, but I wanted to ask some of the questions that I've gotten in the thread here. The beams that we saw, this was not done in a single day. It took a matter of weeks, maybe even longer, to move it from point A to point B, where it ultimately landed. And as you probably saw in the video, there were sections of these beams that were there. They were then, the cribs were rebuilt and beams were then replaced, and then it went on to sort of the next section, and then ultimately to its final landing spot. So it took a series of weeks to get there. The beams that were used to move it, do they just come out now and get taken away, or are they used as part of the construction? Do they have a value beyond just the moving, or is it just there for the move?
It was just there for the move. If you look back in the video where there were cutouts in the concrete foundation, the cutouts were there not for windows, but just space for the beams to rest on. So it was all mathematics and measuring ahead of time, so that when it was laid down, the beams would sit there until they could put the cribs in, and then lift it up a little bit, remove all the beams, and then sit it down on the foundation. So those are up in New Hampshire now, all of them. And one of the reasons why it took so many weeks was the fact that in a job like this, you have different companies doing different parts of the project. And they were ready to go, but the foundation people, and they call that the site work, that was delayed a little bit. So that's why they had to wait and come back. And cement has to cure a certain amount of time, and especially on the floor of a building there. So that had something to do with the delay. They could have been in and out of there in about a week and a half.
Right. Well, I know we're coming to the end of our. It did. Thanks so much. I know it's coming to the end of our time together on the call. One of the questions that was raised was around whether or not the anything broke in the chapel move, and I guess we're not really sure. I didn't see anything on the outside of it, but I guess we can find out when we one day open it up and find out. And then certainly, if Stan were here, he could tell us a little bit about his experiences in moving historic buildings. But I want to take this opportunity to thank you, PJ, for joining us today, and for the STEAM challenge that you gave to our students, to Maddie for capturing this historic moment that will be preserved forever. You were really part of history of Framingham, and thanks for being part of that. And Rick, for inviting us to engage in a really collaborative way in this project, for bringing us behind the scenes and getting us that sort of backstage pass to see the chapel move in a way that we never could have seen it from this bird's eye view. So to all of you, and certainly to Stan and his team, the Granite State Building Movers, I want to thank everybody for coming together with this project. I hope those who are watching enjoyed this time together today. We'll make sure we make the video available. Please share it widely, and have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy the beautiful sunshine, and if you have a chance to drive to the corner of Water and Edgell and check it out, you can see where it actually happened in Framingham, and you can appreciate the magnitude of this challenge as it was. So to everybody who was involved in this, and certainly to Andy Rose and his team, thank you for letting us onto the project to be part of this historic move. Thanks to everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. Bye-bye.